Hello everyone and welcome back to my run at the Yeti Online Regionals that were hosted in the beginning of, or I should say near the end of February, I should say. So as you see, we have a little bit of a technical difficulty at the start. I forgot to hit record on my opponent's side of the field until after they did their first turn. Their first turn wasn't anything too much. It was just a Spirit of Fire. They ended up creative shocking and then sort of passing the turn over to me. At this point, there wasn't too much to tell me what deck they were playing. I just knew that Spirit of Fire, so it could be a couple things like we said before. It could be another Fire Zander Mirror, could be Fire Merlin, could be Erupting, could be Lorraine. There's a lot of different decks that it could be coming into round number one. So what sort of happened here is that we decided to, like I said, waiting for our opponent to do the entire turn, pass over to us, and as soon as they did, we started ourselves with the Spirit of Fire. We went ahead and drew our 7 cards off of the Spirit of Fire on enter trigger, and drew our 1 to the side for a turn. So as we sort of pick up a hand, we see a Rococo, we see a Hasty Messenger, Create a Shock, 2 Hasty Messengers, a Quasi Arsonist, and as well as a Lurking Assailant. So this hand, I decided to start off a little bit, what's what I'm looking for? A little bit safe. I knew I had a decent amount of cards in hand. I didn't know what my opponent was playing. I didn't want to overcommit too much. So starting with the play one Lurking Assailant is usually a pretty safe play as a whole. And I decided to just go ahead and pass, not pass turn, I should say. I do get the attack in, just to push 2 damage. I want to try and blow my opponent as quick as possible. But we're not playing anything more out of our hand. I have the Creative Shock. I want to start filling the cards in my grave because I have a Rending Flames. I want to start putting as much fire cards as possible into the graveyard as a whole. And this is where I see that my opponent is going to level at this point. They have me pick a card out of their memory. And when they level, we see an arcane card. I think I see Anger of the Skies. I'm like, oh, okay. We're facing Fire Rai. This is really favored for us. Fire Rai is usually a deck that has a lot of aggro coming in because they're banishing a lot of cards in the grave, not really interacting with me. And a lot of their cards might be preventing attacks, which is fine. They could stall out enough with Vanish from Sights, Peace Reunions, and a couple other things that really make our game plan a little more difficult per se. But as a whole, as far as I know, you're pretty much favored into this matchup. You have Planet Explosive, Blazing Throws, your own Rending Flames. Like if there's a turn you can get attacks in, you could just push a whole bunch of damage to put Rai in the back foot and just pretty much close out the game. So I just sort of see here, enabling the webcam for my opponent in the recording because I completely forgot to do that. And we can now see my opponent's game. So they're going to go ahead and start off with an increasing danger. We see a Planet Explosives off the top. Knowing this is pretty good for us, we can set up a couple of turns with a Planet Explosives before Recollect, mark the targets, a couple of different things overall. And our opponent decides to go ahead and drop Peace Reunion, which is fine for us. We're going to go ahead and take this opportunity at the end of my opponent's turn to create a shock. Off the create a shock, we see a Rending and a Blazing Bowman. Knowing that there's a Peace Reunion in the field, I decided to go ahead and drop the Blazing Bowman because with the Rending Flames, we're trying to close out this game a little bit quicker than the Bowman's going to be able to succeed in that. And we just sort of want to fill up the grave as much as possible. So on our material step, we grab a Quicksilver Grail, put the Poison Dagger back underneath, and we go ahead and draw for turn. It's another Rococo. Not really the best draw that we're looking for, but we're sort of trying to, at this point, we know there's no board wipes. There's no trades going to come in from our opponent in terms of units. So we can sort of flood the board out with our own units right now and just set up for that gigantic attack turn that we talked about before. So we're going to put the 2 down. We're going to put down our second Hasty Messenger just so we can filter our cards a little bit. And we ended up with double Planted Explosives and a Quasi Arsonist. This is because once we level to level 1 Rai, we can go ahead and Planted Explosives pre-recorrect if we want to, if we think we have enough lethal to push at the end of my opponent's turn. And it sort of lets us have the remain of a free 4 damage off of Planted, and if we Poison Daggered as well, it sets us up for 5 damage pre-recollect step, which is pretty good. So opponent asks again to banish because they're going to go ahead and level up. And we're going to pick the ends of their ends of the memory. We banish, I think, Disintegrate. Yeah, Disintegrate in an increasing danger, which is beneficial for us because it's not arcane cards, so not forwarding their game plan because Arcane Rai really wants to put their arcane cards into their banishment zone for the extra levels that sort of lets them combo off. So seeing 2 fire cards is really good for us. We know they have a couple of arcane cards probably in their hand, a dead arcane cards in their hand. They didn't get to filter more with increasing danger, and we're feeling pretty good about our spot at this point. And sort of knowing that my opponent is at 22 life, I started doing math. I don't think I could push 22 just yet. I do need a couple of turns of setting up and a couple of attacks to push that type of damage, especially if my opponent decides to Dungeon Guide. So I'm mostly trying to look at my hands, trying to determine what I want to do. If I do want to play explosives this turn, just to push the damage while I can. But while I was looking at that, my opponent decided to go ahead and scry the skies. They're going to look at 2 off the top, debate what they want to keep on top and bottom, and then they're going to put one into their memory off the sky skies. Go ahead and just change the order, put a card down off the top, and they are going to resolve the spell. They do get a trigger off of Rai level 2. Rai level 2 means when you cast a mage spell / action, you can go ahead and gain an enlightenment counter. They go ahead and do that. Now they're at 3, they can draw a card if they need to. And now the opponent's just doing a couple things of their own math here to see if there's anything that they'll be able to do the overall, and they're going ahead and increasing dangerous again. So they get their draw, they get an extra card into their memory, pretty much net positive 1. I can't remember what we drew off of this increasing danger. I don't think there's anything really relevant, at least for the next turn at least. So I think I go ahead and look. I don't even look. I just know I'm leveling. And I know I'm not triggering the Quicksilver up because I don't have lethal in turn to deal 22 damage. So we're going to go ahead and go level 1 Zander. I'm going to have my opponent go ahead and pick a card between 1 and 5 from my memory, just for leveling. And they grab a Whirling Squirrels. Oh, that's where we grab the increasing damage. So Whirling Squirrels, not too much worried about it. And we're going to go ahead and hit our Recollect off of Zander Enter, which is a Clumsy Apprentice and a Creative Shock. The Creative Shock isn't bad to have at this point. No, we're not really pushing too much damage, but I don't really need it. Same with the Clumsy Apprentice. I'm just trying to rush as much as possible. A marked target would help me beneficially here. And I'm debating at this point if I want to Plant Explosives, go ahead and push 5 damage. I knew I sort of messed up a little bit because of I didn't pop Quicksilver Rail. But because of that fact, I didn't decide to do Planted Explosives prepped. I just did 2 damage to make utilization fully out of my memory in hand, because I'm not going to hit a turn next turn where I need both. So pushing 2 damage could really come into play later on. We decided to start the turn with a Hasty Messenger, knowing that I have, I think 3 Rending Flames in hand. I go ahead and discard 1 because it's at this point just redundant. We go ahead and draw off of that, deal 1 damage to our opponent. Actually, no, not deal 1 damage. We on attack trigger, my opponent's going to go ahead and Resolute Stand, which for us is a little bit okay. They pretty much did everything, paid for the free cost version of it. So we decided to go ahead and set up our turn again and just start widening the board. As you can tell, I'm sort of getting a little annoyed at the wire that's on my screen. We go ahead and set up with another Hasty Messenger. And like I said, we're just here to set up as much damage as possible. We can't Rococo. There's not enough damage on our, not a little amount, I should say, influence on our board for Rococo to come in and do the 2 damage. So we pretty much set up with 3 Hasty Messengers here and a Lurking Sun alone, which is going to push about 5 damage, if not another 4 with Poison Dagger. So they're pushing 9 damage on their own. And we have the Plant Explosives in hand prep to push another 5. So we go ahead and deal 14 damage to our opponent at the beginning of our next turn if we want to, putting them at 18. And then depending on what they do, we pretty much have the setup. They're also a Rending Flame combo to just push the final bit of damage. So opponent decides to go ahead and hard level up to level 3 Rai, banishing a couple more cards from their hand. So we go ahead and pick their 3. We pick the 3 cards that aren't to end this time. And go up to level 3 Rai. And we did banish, I think 2 or 3 arcane cards. So 2 more arcane cards, Sphere and something else that I'm not really sure of. But they go ahead and level, and now I'm sitting there doing math in my head. I'm like, okay, do we have lethal? We have a couple of plays. We have a Rococo. Can we get both down? What's the overall game plan? So my opponent is down to 2 cards also. They don't get the draw because of the Resolute Stand. And there's sort of 3 cards because of the Resolute Stand. And they decide to get 1 draw off of the Rai, though. And sort of not really much else. They're sort of playing on the back foot here. And this is where, like I said, Fire Zander is favored. Because of the fact that Fire Zander can just push a whole bunch of damage unanswered at this point. Because they have 4 cards in hand. They can have a Planet Explosives. I mean, not Planet Explosives. I still sure can if they want. But we decided to just go ahead and rip the trigger at this point. We go ahead and begin our turn. We do the Quicksilver Rail into a Poison Dagger. And I think we also set up here with a Fire Bobble just to get a card draw in hand if we need it. Yeah, I think I'm debating doing math at this point. And I think there's no need to get the Vrook Soul Knife because I can definitely hit enough cards to banish off of it to get the class bonus trigger. We go ahead and pop the dagger, deal 1 to our opponent. Now everything this turn deals an extra 1 damage. And before recollect, we're going to go ahead and pop Planet Explosives Prepped to do 4, possibly 5 damage to our opponent. Our opponent is going to go ahead and Spell Shield Arcane, which for us is fine for the most part. We're sitting going, okay, it's 5, but we could deal with this at this point. They have nothing else in their hand. They can draw a card into a Resolute, but otherwise there's not too much overall that they're threatening us with. So we go ahead and recollect. We have a Squirrel's hand. We start with the Hasty. We don't need the Korhazi Arsonist at this point because we're going to use our mana to Rending Flames, and we do draw the Mark to target, which is pushing a lot of extra damage for us, which was beneficial. So we deal 2 to our opponent off of the Hasty Messenger because of the Poison Dagger. We go ahead and swing another 2. We hit the fact we don't need the third secondary Rending Flame because, like I said, we're using it once. We're going for lethal this turn anyway, and I didn't really feel a need to have it. And we're just sort of discarding our hand down as much as possible to filter and get fire cards in the grave to Vrook Soul Knife and Rending Flame. We push another 2, technically 3 damage, put our opponent up to 14. Or sorry, 13 there at 10. And now here I'm doing math of, okay, can I push lethal? How does my math work to doing something like getting Rococo? And can I get double Rococo? And I'm doing a lot of math and trying to figure out if there's a way to do this ideally. There is a plan where I can go ahead and put Squirrel down as well if I want to. And this is me doing math at this point because I'm really bad at doing the hand math because I always count the card in my hand as what I'm casting. And I think I end up coming out in a way I can Rending Flame, Squirrel, and get 1 Rococo off to push a decent amount of damage. So we go ahead and banish 3 fire cards from our grave. We still have 4 more in there. And we grab Vrook Soul Knife. That will deal an extra 1 damage. So we go ahead and put down so 1, 2, 3. We put down a Rococo. We can Rending Flame. I do think I have a little misplay. I don't think my opponent was going to be able to. I have to relook if my opponent was able to get 2 recollection counters. 5 of the playing explosives. So we go ahead and swing 3, 4 damage. Technically, 8 plus 1 with the Soul Knife. So we go ahead and decide to crack the Bobble here. Not Bobble, draw a card. Clumsy Apprentice. We will play Squirrels, swing in for 1 damage to put my opponent up to 24. And then we can go ahead and give my opponent 1 opportunity to repay 1 into Rococo and to deal for 3 damage off the Rococo on enter trigger. And at this point, my opponent's thinking, trying to figure out what they want to do. They're going ahead and draw off of their Rai, try and see if they hit another spell shield or anything like that to help them stabilize. And they're going to draw 2 more. And I don't think they hit the spell shield arcane off of the draws. And then they go ahead and concede. And we move on over to game 3. So here we are in game 2. Sorry, I said game 3 before. I meant to say game 2. But game 2, opponent says go first. They're going to go ahead and go first. They're going to go ahead and play Spirit of Fire. And the usual begin the turn and trying to figure out what they want to do because they have creative shocks, they have increasing dangers. The increasing danger, I can't draw the card from my memory because I'm level 0. I don't get a recollection step for my first turn. So if they increase in danger, I'll put a card into my memory. But at this point, I don't think they want to benefit me too much by doing that. They're going to say pass. We grab Spirit of Fire. We draw our 7 cards plus our 1 extra for being the going second player. And in your hand, we have Rococo, Blazing Bowman, Hasty Messenger, Ignited Stab, Whirlwind Squirrels, Honorable Vanguard, and I think we also had Cremation Ritual. Sorry, not Cremation Ritual, Mark the Target. I'm trying to which play we want to do first. We go ahead and we hit the Arthur off of our draw for the turn. Perfect. In this situation, I'm not fearing too much of playing Arthur tapped because my opponent is playing Rai. There's not too many answers they have to deal with Arthur outside of going level 1 Sparklight, which I'm not sure. They haven't really shown that they're using it yet. I'm not too worried, and at this point it's just going to go ahead and push damage. Our opponent is going to take the 2 damage from Arthur. We're going to put 2 cards down, and we're going to play Hasty Messenger. And then with Hasty Messenger, we're going to swing it for another 2, not using Hasty Messengers on attack trigger because we have no cards in hand. Our opponent is now thinking on any responses. They could Resolute Stand if they want, try to negate a little bit of damage. It feels a little bad for them because they didn't do it on the Arthur. They really could have prevented 2 extra damage a turn. But sometimes you got to think about if that's what you want to take it. And they decide to go ahead and pay 3 down. With the 3 down, they are going to go ahead and Resolute Stand. So Resolute Stand resolves. We pass the turn over to our opponent. Our opponent goes and asks us to level. Or I should say pick a card from the memory to level. And we're going to go ahead and pick, it's a card at random. I think we picked the one closest to their material deck, if I'm not mistaken. So yep, we got Anger the Skies down. Perfect. And again, sorry for a little bit of delay in terms of reactions. This is just, like I said, the issue of webcam games as a whole. Some things are a little bit slightly delayed because of recording purposes. My opponent, we do hit Anger the Skies again. Good for us. They hit level 3 Arcane Rai. They won't be able to board wipe as easily. Depending, because some Rai lists are only running 1, some are running 2. Very rarely are they running 3, but if you're in a ally heavy meta, 3 Anger the Skies is pretty good. Our opponent's going to go ahead and Piece of Reunion. We say, sure, that's fine with us. We're going to grab our Poison Dagger, put our card underneath it, or a Quick Circle, I should say, with the Poison Dagger underneath it. We go ahead and recollect and draw. So looking at our hand, we decide we could probably set up again as much damage as possible to our opponent because it is a Piece of Reunion. I'm not too worried about anything else that might come down. We don't want to use Blazing Bowman yet because we have no fire cards, so we go ahead and play a Clumsy. And let's see if we can start drawing cards to set us up in a better position. So off of that, we go ahead and get another Ignited Stab. We have now 2 in hand, so this is sort of good for us. And we're debating if there's anything else we want to do. More likely not, because if we level, we can go ahead and ignite it, mark the target by beginning recollect if we want to, and just start doing math calculations. And having the squirrels in hand on a turn that can't attack is pretty good in case we draw something beneficial, or if we need it for a discard or something like that into a future turn. I'm not overcommitting my board state. It's overcommitting the board state, like I said before. If I do hit level 3 Arcane Rai this turn and have Anger the Skies, I lost an extra attacker for a turn that didn't matter. So in this case, peeing back to Whirling Squirrels is an overall positive play for us, and just something that we could set up for a later turn if we need to, or pushing lethal. It's less math that my opponent automatically calculates into their defensive plan as well. So opponent go ahead and goes to level 2 Rai. Off of that, they are sort of debating what else they want to do. They hit, I think, 1 arcane card and a careful study, so they're up to 2. And they're sort of, like I said, Rise is pretty much on the back for all the time in this, unless there's something overall that is netting cards like Crazy Shock, increasing danger. There's not too much they're doing early on. And as you can start to see there, I fumbled my hand. I was sitting there hand shuffling, and I fully almost fumbled it, revealing what was in it. But thankfully, I was able to catch it before anything happened on stream. So my opponent decides to go ahead and pay 2 down. I think debating a third. I think they Dungeon Guide here, if I'm not mistaken. Rai usually wants to run Dungeon Guides because Dungeon Guide overall affords their game plan, not needing to banish 3 cards to level. So opponent decides to go ahead and pass with 4 cards in hand. I decide I don't need to pull the trigger yet. We can level here though, but we really don't need to do anything special to level. So they're going to go ahead and say get rid of our Blazing Bowman. So we get rid of that. We unenter trigger. We see a Lurking Sand Audible Vanguard. They're not horrible to have in hand, but I really don't need at least Audible Vanguard. I already have one. I'm going to keep the Lurking Sand on top because Lurking Sand can go ahead and push 3 damage, especially within the Arthur. And they don't really have anything else just yet that's threatening. And usually the best plan of attack here is just to attack with the Arthurs first. It lets me and attack with all the units. It lets me determine how much I need to commit to my board state. And that's what I do. If they have Resolute Stand, they'll Resolute Stand if they want to. So I go ahead and swing in 2 with Arthur. And then say, okay, what do you have? So they're going to go ahead and fireball the Arthur for 3. And I say, sure, perfect. No, we have 1 card in hand at this point. That's fine by me. Arthur dies. It might negate a little bit of damage later on, but this is a lethal card out of their hand. So it pretty much buys me an extra turn as a whole. To set up, we go ahead and swing one with Hasty. We put Honorable Vanguard in the grave. We get our 1 damage in. Swing another 1 Clumsy Apprentice. Swinging 4. My opponent's not really looking at their hand, so I'm really assuming they're not having a resolute stand here. And because of that, we're just going to go ahead and commit a little bit more board state. And we go ahead and pay 3. We play down our Lurking Assailant. We don't have to worry about our opponent attacking into it, so we can go ahead and just attack and enter. We don't have to leave for the stealth mechanics, put our opponent at 6. And now we play squirrels. As I said for this, I think this is a misplay a little bit. I think we might have overcommitted if there was a board wipe, if we were punished. But we push home our damage to our opponent and say, okay, deal with our board. I know we have Ignited Stabs. I know we have Mark to Targets in here. So we have about 6 damage in hand, possibility in hand. We're also with a Poison Dagger. We have technically another 2, so 8 damage in hand if we really need to. But our opponents really, as I playing on the back foot at this point, they can't level. So they're going to grab a GCR. They're going to go ahead and draw. And I knew my opponent couldn't level at this point because unless it's a Dungeon Guide. If they Dungeon Guide, I'm not too worried because they can't do anything else for the turn. So they're going to go ahead and recollect and draw. And at this point, they're sitting with 5 cards in hand. They can Dungeon Guide, like I said, hit level 3. They hit one more off of the Enlightenment counters going off to draw to go up 6 cards. But again, I'm not feeling pressured. They need 7 to level and also anger. So I'm not in a position that I'm worried and going, okay, what's the possibility? The possibility is, like I said, my opponent just levels. And I'm not fully concerned with that play at all. The extra couple life doesn't really matter at this point, especially if you dagger. We have such a wide board state that we're just pushing a ton of damage. There's not really much for our opponents going to be able to do. They go ahead and scry the skies here. And when they scry the skies, we decide to say, okay, scry the skies. They drop a card from the grave. Perfectly fine. They drop the fireball that was in the grave. It happens, webcam games. They draw one into memory. And as they're sitting there debating what else to do, I'm just mostly doing these math calculations in my head. Because right now in this play, we have Dagger for 1, Hasty Messenger for 2, put it 3, Clumsy would be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 with Lurking, 9, 10 with Squirrel. We have Ignited Stab for another 5, 15, Ignited Mark Start for 16. Like we have more than likely a lethal damage on board if it comes to it. So we decide to say, yep, we're going to grab Safeguard Amulet just to be safe. In case we don't get the lethal this turn, we can set up for more damage into a future turn if we need to. So we go ahead and go into Recollect phase. We pop the dagger. We pay 1. We mark the target. Deal 10. This is also sort of a little bit of a mistake. If I decided not to Poison Dagger early, my opponent could have vanished the site if they had it, and they could have really punished this attack as a whole. The better plan was just mark the target and then Poison Dagger after the fact. I had lethal on board. I wasn't too worried. I didn't need to push that damage the way I did. But we go ahead and swing 1 off of Hasty Messenger. And I think we discard one of our Ignited Stabs. No, we discard a Mark to Target. We don't really need a second one. So we discard Mark to Target. Deal 2 to our opponent off of the Hasty. We go ahead and swing another 2 with Clumsy. Our opponent's not really responding at this point, so I'm thinking they don't have a Resolute stand or any other way to deal with the board state. We swing another 2 with our Squirrels. Put our opponent up to 15. 3 more with Lurking Assailant. Put our opponent up to 18. And we could just go, okay, we can Ignited Stab here prepped, and we can just push lethal here for 15. Our opponent's going to go ahead and Creative Shock. More likely digging for a Resolute stand or anything of the sort. They go up to 2 counters, and I go, okay, sure. They Creative Shock, and from there they look, don't really see anything in their hand. They discard a Glimpse, and they deal 2 to me. I actually marked on my opponent, but I say, okay, sure. Then we will go ahead and now Ignited Stab here for 5, just to push lethal. So Ignited Stab for 5. I think put my opponent up to 18, 19. And then, yeah, I had the Clumsy Apprentice as well to swing if my opponent didn't have anything else, and my opponent just goes ahead and look off the top. But thank you guys for joining for another video. This is, like I said, our Yeti Regional Round 2. We're now 1-1 record at this point. We're going to go into round number 3 in our next video and go from there. But thank you guys for joining, and have a good one. Peace.